Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life that quietly transforms everything. It is not always a dramatic scene. It is not always filled with arguments, tears, or a final farewell. Sometimes the biggest changes happen in silence. Sometimes they begin when you stop responding instantly. Sometimes they begin when you no longer waste your energy explaining yourself to people who never made the effort to understand you. Sometimes they begin when you choose inner peace, instead of fighting to prove your worth. Sometimes they begin when you create distance. And that is the exact moment when everything starts to change. Because when you were constantly present, they failed to recognize the importance of your presence. When you were always available, they started seeing your kindness as something normal. When you kept forgiving again and again, they assumed your heart would never reach its limit. When you continued giving your time, attention, and energy, they believed you would never become tired. When you kept making the effort, they thought your dedication was something they were automatically entitled to receive. But the moment you stepped back, the moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped investing yourself into people who only knew how to take, something powerful happened. That was the moment they began noticing what they had been ignoring. That was the moment your real strength became visible, not because you became cold, not because you became a different person, but because your absence finally showed the value that your constant presence had been hiding. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a powerful reality about human behavior. People often fail to appreciate what they receive every single day. When something is always available, the mind can slowly stop recognizing its importance. Familiar things can become invisible. Repeated kindness can become expected. Constant support can become something people assume will always exist. A person with a generous heart can be mistaken for someone who has endless patience. A person who always responds can be treated as someone who will always be there whenever needed, without consideration, without respect, and without real effort. But then one day the pattern changes. The messages are no longer answered the same way. The attention is no longer given so freely. The warmth becomes calm silence. The person who was always reaching out finally stops reaching. And suddenly, they notice the difference. They feel the shift. They begin asking questions they never asked before. Where did that energy go? Why does this person feel different now? Why does their absence feel heavier than expected? Stay with me, because this is where human psychology becomes truly interesting. The moment you stop over-giving, people often begin seeing the things they previously overlooked. Not always because they suddenly changed completely, but because your distance forces them to face a reality they had been avoiding. Sometimes it happens because they suddenly feel afraid of losing access to something they once considered guaranteed. That is the hidden strength of distance. Distance does not create your value. Your value was already present from the beginning. Distance simply reveals how unaware others were of it. And this is where many people misunderstand the meaning of true strength. They believe power has to be loud. They believe power means controlling every situation, having the final word, winning every disagreement, proving every argument, and making sure everyone sees their importance. But genuine power is much quieter than that. Real power is being able to step into silence and still feel confident within yourself. Real power is no longer needing approval from people who cannot appreciate you honestly. Real power is being able to walk away without falling apart, being able to create space without feeling lost, being able to stand alone without feeling incomplete. That kind of strength is uncommon. That kind of confidence creates a different energy. It changes the way people see you. Because when you stop trying to convince others of your worth, they are finally forced to recognize it naturally. Think about this for a moment. How many times have people understood your importance only after you stopped being easily available? How many times did they recognize your kindness only after you stopped giving it without limits? How many times did they feel the emptiness of your absence only after you removed yourself from their everyday life? How many times did they finally understand your value only after they could no longer receive your love without making any effort? This is one of the hardest truths about human connections. Being valuable to someone and being respected by someone are two completely different things. You can have a meaningful place in someone's life and still be treated carelessly. You can be cared about and still be ignored. You can be appreciated quietly and still be taken for granted in daily life. You can be the person who supports everyone, carries the weight, and keeps things together, yet still be the person nobody remembers to appreciate. And that is why distance can become something powerful. Distance is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a lesson. Distance is not always about getting revenge. Sometimes it is about finding yourself again. Distance is not always created from anger. Sometimes it comes from finally seeing things clearly. Distance does not always mean you stopped caring. Sometimes it means you finally care enough about yourself to stop giving pieces of your heart to people who never learned how to protect them. Ladies and gentlemen, listen closely because this message may touch something inside you. There was once a version of you that was always available, a version of you that forgave too quickly, waited too patiently, explained too much, stayed too long, and tried too hard to make everything work. A version of you that wanted to be understood so deeply that you kept repeating your feelings to people who had already decided not to listen. But that version of you was not weak. That version of you had a beautiful heart. That version of you believed in people. That version of you saw possibilities where others saw limitations. That version of you thought that if you loved enough, cared enough, sacrificed enough, and gave enough chances, the connection would eventually become the relationship you always hoped for. But there is a truth many people learn too late. Kindness without boundaries can slowly become self-neglect. Love without respect can slowly become self-loss. Giving without awareness can teach others to take advantage of your generosity. And when you are always available to people who do not value your presence, they may stop seeing the gift you bring into their lives. Then one day something changes inside you. A quiet awakening begins. You start responding with more intention instead of immediate reaction. You stop carrying every conversation on your shoulders. You stop being the only person trying to keep the connection alive. You stop creating excuses for actions that repeatedly hurt you. You stop explaining your pain to people who choose not to understand it. You stop making yourself smaller just to make others feel comfortable. You stop giving your entire energy to relationships where your effort is ignored. And that moment, ladies and gentlemen, is not the moment you lose something. It is the moment you begin finding yourself again. Because when you step back, something remarkable begins to happen. The people who were comfortable with your constant giving start noticing the silence you left behind. They begin feeling the space where your effort used to be. They begin recognizing the value of what they once received without thinking, and that is when the power of your absence becomes impossible to ignore. The people who never truly recognized your loyalty begin to feel the impact of your absence. The people who believed you would always remain available suddenly experience the silence you left behind, and within that silence they begin hearing the truth they ignored for so long. They begin understanding that you were the one carrying the connection forward. They begin realizing that your presence made everything feel warmer, calmer, and more valuable. They begin seeing that you were not simply another person standing beside them. You were the care, the patience, the understanding, the emotional support, the steady presence that helped hold everything together. They begin noticing that without you, the atmosphere feels different, the connection feels weaker. The comfort they once depended on is no longer there in the same way, and suddenly they recognize a strength in you that they never acknowledged before. Not because you demanded their attention, not because you convinced them through endless explanations, not because you begged them to understand your worth, but because distance has a unique way of exposing the things that constant closeness often hides. People show their true nature when they have unlimited access to you. But they also show their true nature when that access is taken away. Some people will return with genuine intentions. Some will return because they truly recognize what they lost. Some will return because they miss you. But some will return only because they miss the comfort, support, and attention you provided. And this is where awareness becomes important, Because every return does not mean someone has changed. Every apology does not mean someone has grown. Every "I miss you" does not automatically mean someone understands your heart. Sometimes people only recognize your importance after your availability disappears. Sometimes they only respect your consistency when they can no longer depend on it without effort. This is why your distance should come from wisdom, not from anger. You do not step away to control someone's emotions. You step away to understand reality. You create space to see clearly. You create distance to hear the truth that was hidden beneath all the noise. Stay with me, because this realization can completely change how you see relationships. You create distance to discover who truly values you, who truly respects you, and who truly misses you as a person rather than only missing what you provided. And when that understanding arrives, it can be painful, because now you see things you cannot ignore. Now you understand who was genuinely walking beside you, and who was simply enjoying what you gave. Now you recognize who appreciated your heart, and who only appreciated your availability. Now you understand who valued your presence, and who only valued the comfort your presence created. Now you see who loved your depth, and who was only attached to the benefits of having you around. Sometimes the hardest truth is realizing that someone understood your value only after they no longer had easy access to it. But even painful truths carry a purpose. Pain can either turn into bitterness or become wisdom. Pain can either make you chase harder or teach you how to stand stronger. Pain can either make you regret your kindness or teach you how to give with greater awareness. The goal is not to become heartless. The goal is to become more conscious. Do not punish everyone because a few people fail to appreciate you. Do not lock your heart forever because someone mishandled your trust. Do not confuse having standards with being cruel. Do not confuse protecting yourself with becoming cold. A strong person does not stop caring. A strong person simply learns where their care belongs. A strong person stops giving their deepest energy to places that repeatedly show they cannot respect it. That is growth. That is self-respect. That is emotional strength. Because true power comes from becoming deeply connected to yourself, rather than being controlled by the reactions and opinions of others. When a person is disconnected from themselves, they constantly search outside for proof that they matter. They need endless reassurance. They need constant attention. They need others to confirm their value. But when someone becomes secure within themselves, silence no longer feels like rejection. Space no longer feels like abandonment. Being alone no longer feels like emptiness. They can step back and still remain whole. They can be misunderstood and still remain confident. They can walk away without losing their identity. That is real strength. And when you finally begin creating distance, you may expect sadness, uncertainty, or even fear. You may wonder if you are doing the right thing. You may question whether people will notice. But then something unexpected happens. Distance gives you a clearer vision. It allows you to observe what was impossible to see. While you are constantly giving, you begin recognizing who genuinely cared about you. You begin seeing who only cared about your availability. You begin noticing who respected you when they had to make an effort. You begin understanding who wanted your energy but did not want to respect your limits. You begin discovering who valued your usefulness more than your humanity. And that realization can shake you deeply, because once you see something clearly, you cannot return to pretending you never saw it. A person can tolerate pain when the truth is unclear, but clarity changes everything. Clarity says, this is what was happening. Clarity says, this is what they were willing to risk losing. Clarity says, this is how they treated something valuable when it was easy to access. But do not look at this awareness as only a loss. Look at it as freedom. Every time someone reveals their true intentions, they are giving you information that protects your future. They are helping you stop investing years, months, and days into connections that only survive because you keep sacrificing yourself. You do not have to keep pouring water into places where nothing grows. You do not have to keep proving your worth to people who only notice it after you disappear. You do not have to return to the role of the person who always fixes, always forgives, always understands, and always carries the emotional weight alone. You were never created to be endlessly available for everyone. You were never meant to be treated like a resource that people can use whenever they need comfort. You are meant to live with awareness, dignity, and self-respect. And when you finally begin living from that place, everything starts transforming. The way you speak changes. The way you choose changes. The way you protect your energy changes. Your confidence changes. Your presence changes. And people begin noticing the difference, not because you tried to become someone else, but because you finally returned to yourself. Your standards begin to shift. Your relationships begin to transform. Your entire life starts moving in a different direction, because the moment you stop begging to be accepted, you finally become someone who is chosen with genuine intention. When you stop making yourself constantly available, you become much harder to disrespect. When you stop chasing every person who offers an empty hand, you create space for those who understand the difference between temporary convenience and meaningful connection. When you stop trying to explain your value to people who refuse to see it, the right people recognize your worth without needing a long explanation. And this is one of the most surprising truths about life. The tighter you hold on, the more your power slips away. The more you release what does not honor you, the more strength returns to you. When you were always close, some people became careless. When you created space, they became aware. When you were always reachable, your presence became something they overlooked. When you stepped back, your presence became something they remembered. And memory, ladies and gentlemen, is often where longing begins. People rarely miss what they believe will always remain available. They miss what brought life into their world. They miss the warmth. They miss the comfort. They miss the understanding. They miss the person who made their days lighter, deeper, and more meaningful. And when that person was you, they may finally feel the emptiness created by your absence. But do not allow that realization to pull you back into the same cycle too quickly, because there is a powerful difference between someone missing you and someone truly valuing you. Being missed means they feel the space you left behind. Being valued means they respected your importance before you ever walked away. Being missed often happens after something is damaged. Being valued helps prevent that damage from happening. Never confuse these two things. Some people only recognize the value of something after they no longer have easy access to it. But your life was never meant to be a hidden treasure waiting for someone else's regret to discover it. Your presence deserves appreciation while you are still present. Your love deserves respect while you are still offering it. Your energy deserves care while you are still sharing it. Your heart deserves protection while it is still open. And if someone cannot understand that, they may simply not be prepared for the depth you carry. Ladies and gentlemen, the strongest people are often those who learn how to be misunderstood without losing themselves. They understand that not everyone deserves a key to their inner world. They understand that constantly explaining yourself to people who have already chosen not to understand you slowly becomes a form of abandoning yourself. They learn that peace is more valuable than trying to win approval from those who are committed to seeing you incorrectly. They learn that being quiet and complete is better than being loud and emotionally broken. They learn that distance can protect them from the slow exhaustion of giving too much of themselves to people who do not know how to handle it. Because when you expose every part of yourself too quickly to the wrong people, something happens. Your uniqueness begins to feel ordinary to them. Your kindness becomes something they expect. Your loyalty becomes something they assume will always exist. Your patience becomes something they take advantage of. Your vulnerability becomes something they observe without understanding the responsibility that comes with it. So when you create distance, it is not because you are trying to play a game. It is because you finally understand that not everything valuable should be given without thought. You learn that having some mystery is not about hiding. It is about protecting what matters. You learn that privacy is not rejection. It is a way of preserving your peace. You learn that not every feeling needs to be explained, not every struggle needs to be shown, and not every emotion needs to be shared with everyone. Stay with me, because this is the point where many people experience a complete shift in their life. When you begin living from this deeper awareness, you become more difficult to control, more difficult to drain, and more difficult to confuse. That is why your distance carries power. It ends the old pattern. It removes the automatic access. It breaks the assumptions people created about you. It forces a new reality. Now people must interact with the version of you who no longer reveals everything immediately. The version of you who no longer carries every responsibility alone. The version of you who no longer tries to rescue people who refuse to help themselves. The version of you who no longer mistakes love for constant sacrifice. The version of you who no longer rewards repeated disappointment with endless chances. The version of you who understands that patience is valuable and should not be wasted on those who continuously choose to hurt you. And in this new reality, everything becomes clearer. Their emotions become easier to understand. Their intentions become easier to recognize. Their respect becomes visible through their actions. Their effort becomes obvious through their consistency or through their absence. Their love becomes something real that can be felt. Or it becomes nothing more than words. This is why distance can be such a powerful teacher. It teaches others what your presence meant. It teaches you what others were willing to lose. It teaches everyone involved the difference between what was real and what was simply expected. But perhaps the deepest lesson is this: your greatest strength was never how much you could give before you completely exhausted yourself. Your strength was never measured by how much pain you could tolerate while pretending everything was fine. Your strength was never about how long you could accept neglect and still call it love. Your real power comes from awareness. Your power comes from recognizing what is true and what is illusion. Your power comes from having the courage to leave situations that slowly reduce your value. Your power comes from becoming less available to what repeatedly fails to respect you. Your power comes from honoring yourself. And self-respect creates a different presence. People notice it. At first some may become uncomfortable with it. Then some may try to challenge it. Some may test your boundaries. But eventually, those who are mature enough will understand and respect them. And those who cannot accept your growth were never truly prepared for your future. Let that truth remain with you. You are not difficult because you want consistency. You are not uncaring because you want equal effort. You are not selfish because you protect your peace. You are not arrogant because you expect respect. You are not wrong for stepping away from things that repeatedly hurt you. You are not too much. You were simply giving too much to people who were willing to give too little. And once you understand that, everything changes. You stop feeling guilty for having standards. You stop weakening your boundaries. You stop seeing your sensitivity as a weakness. You stop treating your awareness like a problem. You stop asking permission to protect your own heart. Because you finally understand that your heart is not a place where everyone should enter without respect. It is something precious. It deserves care. It deserves honesty. It deserves protection. And when you begin treating yourself with that level of respect, the entire energy around you changes. You stop chasing people who only notice you after you disappear. You stop begging for attention from those who only react when access is removed. You stop confusing someone's pursuit with your value. You stop believing that another person's distance means you are impossible to love. Instead, you discover a deeper truth. The right people do not need to lose you before they recognize you. The right people do not wait until you're silenced to understand your importance. The right people recognize your value while you are still standing beside them. The right people respect your boundaries without making you feel guilty. The right people are not threatened by your standards. The right people do not require you to perform just to receive basic care. The right people do not become interested only when your absence creates discomfort. They see you, they appreciate you, they respect you, they meet you where you are. And that is why you should never build your entire life around the attention of people who only wake up when you step away. You were never meant to become someone's lesson because they refuse to appreciate you. You were never meant to lose yourself so someone else could finally understand your value. You were never meant to suffer just so another person could grow. Your purpose is not to remain small so others can feel powerful. Your purpose is to become complete within yourself. And when you become complete, you become harder to control. You become harder to manipulate. You become harder to break with silence or distance. You become someone who finally understands that your peace is not something you negotiate. It is something you protect. With affection, with unexpected regret, with promises that come from the fear of losing the access they once had. Because the moment your inner strength becomes greater than the pressure around you, something changes. You become free. Freedom is the final chapter of this transformation. First comes the pain, then comes the distance, then comes the understanding, then comes the strength, and finally, freedom arrives. And freedom sounds like this. I no longer need to be present everywhere for everyone. I no longer need to defend my decision to step away. I no longer need to prove the value that my absence has already shown. I no longer need to compete for love. I no longer need to chase basic respect. I no longer need to stay available for people who only know how to take. That is a powerful way to live. That is the voice of a person who has stopped abandoning themselves. And when someone reaches that level of awareness, they are no longer controlled by the fear of being left behind. They are no longer trapped by the desperate need to be chosen. They are no longer controlled by the anxiety of someone replacing them. They stop measuring their importance by how quickly someone responds, how often someone reaches out,